Yeah, 150 and also
There's maybe so I went to she's like sick of it. Vice President. There you go. I am looking so forward to sitting here
but I was making sure it was yes, they did. Thank
If you have not signed in, please sign in the back of the room and we'll get started in just a couple minutes. Thank you.
Friday the 7th, I have something. Nobody signed up. So it's like we have the 9 o'clock, and then we have the 10 o'clock, and then we have all of the everybody's like that. So I have,
I think we're starting at like 5 or 10 after because they're worried about the storms making people late.
The first large college-wide PD for the spring semester that's related to Title III. So for those of you that I don't know, my name's Margot McGowan, and I'm brand new to the Title III project. So this is very exciting for me. Thank you. And your colleagues on the math team have worked very, very hard with their redesign work this semester. We also have some folks from the biology redesign team here to kind of observe. Thank you. Hello, biology folks. I feel like Vanna White up here. Hello. We are going to have a lot more faculty groups involved in this. We're going to have another biology course coming up for redesign later on this year. English 101 is already in pilot phase, just as an update. We're going to have other classes coming at later points during the Title III period. We're having sociology and psychology coming up later. So that's just kind of what's going on with Title III. If you haven't signed in the back, please get a chance to do that. If you did not get a chance to complete the pre-survey online, that sheet of paper is also on the back table. This is what's going to help us with our Title III reporting requirements. This is what's going to help us show what we were thinking before we got our information from Dr. Andersen, and then what we learned from Dr. Andersen and how our mind frame changed through this information.
Does anybody need a survey? I'll be glad.
We can hand it out to you.
Is it the free survey? Yes, the free survey.
The pre-survey. Yeah,
Yes,
and
if
it's
you haven't done it by
anonymous.
email.
Free survey.
Oh, it's a free survey. It's also,
Yes, it's free.
So it
It
only
doesn't
costs
cost
you.
you. It's also free. It's also free.
Anybody else? I mean, what else would I be saying?
That's right. That's right. That's right. Free is good. I
It's
like
free and it's free.
And the snacks that were out there this morning, breakfast snacks, graciously provided by Dr. Davis. So thank you very much, Dr. Davis. We appreciate it. Okay, Nikki, would you like to introduce? Yes. Thank you.
Many of us went to, several of us from the math department went to a MATIC. Back in November. Back in November, and heard specifically to find a content expert. That was our reasoning for going and why Title III was paying for us to go. And we met Maria Andersen. We listened to her talk specifically on learning is not a spectator sport. And at that point we knew. So I stalked her. Literally sat outside of a classroom waiting for her to finish to walk out so I could speak with her. Thank goodness she was very friendly and open.
I sometimes, but not on that day.
Not on that day, she did not, which was really good, and we have since spent a lot of time with her. She has spent 14 years teaching mathematics and chemistry at the college level, 16 years writing curriculum for mathematics, and 6 years developing digital products for learning. She built iPad games to teach algebra, launched the Canvas Network MOOC platform, built adaptive learning platforms using McGraw-Hill, and worked as a director of learning design for WGU. As a professor, Dr. Andersen was president of MISHMATIC, the professional development coordinator for AMATIC, the director of the MCC Math and Technology Workshop, and wrote the Teaching with Tech column from MAA Focus. Maria is a software developer, an instructor, an author, a speaker, a blogger, a game designer, and a learning futurist. She holds a degree in math, chemistry, biology, business administration, and higher education leadership. There you go.
It seems longer every time I hear it. Yeah, so I've done a lot of things in the higher education space and in the educational technology space. I think this gives me kind of a unique background for understanding both exactly what you experience in the classroom. I taught at a community college full-time for 10 years, so believe me when I say I understand. And then I also ventured onto the software side to try to figure out, like, why is it we can't get quite the technology we want to have, and why doesn't it, work the way we think it should? And so I've now kind of seen both worlds. This is, by the way, the view out my front door.
Oh.
Some people want to know why I left education. It was to move to the mountains. This is my view now, so that's why I did it. So anyways, here's where I started. When I was 4, I wanted to be a teacher and Superman. So this is actually a picture I drew of what I wanted to be when I grew up. And then when I was 5, something really profound happened. This is my mother. She had a cerebral hemorrhage and had a stroke when I was 5 years old. So she lost her ability to read, to write, to talk, to do math. She had a math degree. She lost the use of her right-hand side, and so our lives changed completely. Because of what happened to her, I started learning about how the brain works when I was 5, right? I had to help her to figure out how to re-navigate the entire world when I was just learning how to navigate the world myself. So very simple things like how to lock a sliding door were simple to me, but very difficult for her. She only had the use of one hand, and she couldn't remember anymore long term. And so you had to kind of approach every problem from 10 unique perspectives before you found one that actually stuck, right? So from the time I was 5, I spent my entire childhood looking at every single problem kind of through the eyes of somebody who has a hard time learning. And so I learned that there are multiple approaches to things. I figured out all sorts of different ways to explain problems. I think in some sense this is how I ended up eventually where I'm at, which is having spent a lot of time really focusing on how people learn, cognitive science, the research around learning, what sticks, what doesn't stick, motivation, behavior, etc. Because I started when I was 5. So I have like a lot of years of experience in this at this point, even though I look a little bit young. I also tried to figure out at some point exactly when I learned what along the way as an adult. So this was like college right here, and then these are like all of the things I learned outside of college. I tend to take an approach that when I get interested in a subject, I like learn it as deeply as possible. So like you give yourself a master's degree or a PhD by going in and reading all the literature, finding some mentors in the field, etc. So along the way there were quite a few topics I did that with, leading to where I am today. Those are just all a long way of saying that where I've landed now I think is a field we call now learning engineering, which is where you look at both the theoreticals around learning, the research around learning, the practical around like how do you really get students to do things that you need them to do, and the technology, and then that all comes together in this field of learning engineering. I also had to try to figure out how to put everything that I've learned into a fairly concise talk/workshop to help other people to kind of quickly get a sense for how they might shift practices in their own teaching. And so I came up with three kind of categories here, and we'll go through them one by one, so they'll be kind of secret letters to start with. And it does feel a little bit like this. Anyone want to take a guess at what movie this is?
The Matrix.
This is The Matrix, yes. So this is the jack going into the back of the head, in case the stick figure drawing isn't clear there. So it can be a little bit like The Matrix. I'm trying to take, this diagram right here, take the important parts from it, and then try to like transfer as much as I can to you, so you can go out and be amazing, be more amazing, I should say. So the first thing we're going to do is a partner activity, okay? But before we start that, I want you to think about something that you learned in the last year and write it down. Okay, so think about something you learned in the last year and write it down. It doesn't have to be like a course or anything. It can be like, I learned how to pilot a drone, or I learned how to speak conversational Spanish or something. But think of something you learned in the last year and write it down. if you can't think of something in the last year, go back 2 years. If you didn't learn anything in the last 2 years, I'll take some pulses. I'm sure you learned something. Okay, has everybody got something? Okay, I have something, because there's going to be, more here. Okay, so the next thing I want you to do is find a partner. I think most of you are sitting next to somebody you can start with. There are a couple of rows where you're like on opposite ends. Maybe one of you can travel across for that. And maybe you can surround, there's 3 people behind you, so you can find a partner there. And so, very important, though, for this activity that you do not tell your partner what you actually learned. Okay? So don't tell them what you learned. What I want you to do instead, well, first I want you to introduce yourself. So this is always important, so start with that. And then I want you to describe a time you got stuck when you were learning. I want you to describe a time you got stuck when you were learning and how you got through it. But don't tell them what you learned. Okay, that's going to be a big secret for now. All right? Got that?
Does this have to be about what we put down?
What you wrote down, yes.
Oh, okay.
What you wrote down. So think about some time you got stuck in that thing you learned and how you got through it. Okay? So go. So then a second question for the pair of you is, what made you excited during that learning experience? Again, don't tell them what it was, just what made you excited. each pair to stand up, please. One person from each pair to stand up. You decide who. Okay. If you are the stander, you are now the traveler. And your job is to travel to some other pairing. So look around the room so you know where, so you're gonna find somebody who's sitting down. You just can't go where you already were, okay? Just a reminder again, you're not gonna tell anybody what you learned, okay?
I'm
So go
traveling.
find a pair. We've got one down here. Who needs a place to go? Down here? Come on. And then we have one group of 3 somewhere. You want to join these 2?
Which 2 am I joining?
Okay. Wait. We got one over here. Okay, so we're just going to repeat 2 questions. So with your new partner, again, don't tell them what you learned, but go through the 2 questions. So the time you got stuck and what made you excited. Okay?
When I got stuck,
Don't forget to introduce yourself.
hi, I'm John.
I always make students do it, and they give me a hard time, but everybody needs to remember to do it, right?
So when I got stuck, I just got to figure it out. I guess what made me excited No, are you supposed to ask me questions if you don't have to Yeah, well, I guess to a degree similar to I don't know.
What I learned,
Okay. If I can get your attention back. I'd like to explain to you why I didn't let you say what it was you learned. Probably some of you it slipped out, but the reason I didn't let you say what it was you learned is because if I had, your whole conversation would focus on that thing you learned, not the process of learning it, okay? Also because having a little bit of curiosity and a little bit of intrigue makes it more interesting, right? So it's not quite as straightforward, it's a little different of an approach. It's the kind of thing we do in games. We try to create a little bit of intrigue, right? It makes the games fun. So we could keep doing this, and the way we would keep doing it if we did was I just have the travelers stand back up and move to another set of partners, right? By keeping a consistent set of travelers, you can keep switching the partners over and over and over. and it works, right? So as long as you have one consistent set of movers and one consistent set of stayers, you could rotate through many sets of partners in one class, okay? So I wanted us to experience this because this is one of the great ways, I think, of doing partnered work in a class, that you don't always have the same partners. And you can do it if we had a full classroom, I would have had you just move down rows to do it, right? But since we're kind of scattered, this works. The standers find a new partner. The instructor facilitates making sure everybody gets one, right? So I'm going to let you have closure for about a minute so you can tell your partner what you learned, tell your old partner what you learned, and go back to your seats, okay? So, there you go.
This boat trip this summer, I went up into Ohio and New York, so when I ended up seeing my grades, Hillary, Garfield, Stillwater, FDR, I don't know how I got started on that kick, but I went and seen like the great rap.
It's really helpful. I've learned how to deal with it. That's important.
One day I tried to sit down, picture, I named them all.
All of them follow the then I got rid of, I don't think I ever had it. I think it does take something about it.
Okay, so you pick back your own partner. Old partner wants closure too.
Some I do, but this summer, I just have to, like where I was going, you're always so I went to Disney and tried to make sure they were like the summer.
I took 3 classes in
Okay, enough closure. You can continue your conversations on our break later. This withholding of a little bit of information or creating kind of a strange rule around a conversation can be really great for fostering good collaboration among students. When you take away some of the things that students kind of normally discuss amongst themselves, you say, I want you to explain a time when, but you can't talk about this, it actually kind of focuses their attention on the things that maybe are the relevant parts of the conversation and keeps them from straying a little bit off the topic into just the normal, like, hey, how was your weekend, right? Like, you can talk about anything, but you can't talk about football, right? Or the Sweet 16, or whatever's going on, right? What I wanted you to get out of these conversations, and hopefully what came out of the conversations, was that the way you learned, whatever it was you learned, it probably wasn't by reading a textbook, right? And in fact, even in education, I'm not sure that students actually learn by reading the textbook. What they probably learn from, my computer's gone off. Oh, my calendar's they probably learn by the practice they do, the questions they answer, or the discussions they have after they read the textbook. Right? That's probably what results in learning. It's not from listening to the lecture that they learn. I don't know about you, but I cannot remember any of the college lectures I ever had except for the one where the chemistry professor blew stuff up. I remember that one, right? It was the discussions you had afterwards. It was the study groups you had. It was the sitting down. You probably remember like frantic nights at a table somewhere studying, right? That's when we actually experienced learning. Even if you learned something on your own, it probably wasn't actually by watching something like a YouTube video or a lecture on the internet. It was probably by actually trying it that you learned it. And then going back and rewatching, and then going back to try again, and then going back to rewatch, and going back to try, right? That process of actively doing something that resulted in learning, right? So I think this is important to recognize because in education, you know, we have so much content and so much to deliver to students, and we tend to think of it as, you know, okay, you're going to do reading, you're going to do these activities, you're going to, you know, answer some questions, you do a variety of things, but that's not actually what produces the learning. It's just delivering some content, but the content doesn't stick without something else happening, right? So I want to focus on that something else. Delivering the content is something like, you know, just we imagine it as like, oh, we'll just pour in information. This is my representation of a student, by the way. I'm a super artist. So we tend to think of it as pouring in content. But the problem with this is that this is a very passive form of learning. And we have this thing called the forgetting curve, the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. It's actually fairly old research. It's from the 1880s. And what it says is that if you learn something here, so you have a good memory of it, a strong memory of it from listening to it or reading it, the problem is that that memory decays rather quickly over time, right? Now, the decay rate, this is great for mathematicians always, the decay rate is really sharp, but if we re-engage you with it, the slope of that curve lessens. And if we re-engage you with it again, the slope of that curve lessens. And so after multiple re-engagements, the information sticks. Now, if what happens is the student just crams once for a test, passes the test while they're up here, what happens to that knowledge? It goes away, right? And so, you know, we always try to convince students towards the end of the semester that it's a really good idea to have final exams because at least we're trying to combat this decay rate by forcing you to learn it again, right? Do they buy it?
No.
No, but, you know, there is some science behind why we have final exams. It's not, we should probably have more engagement than that, but it's better than nothing, I suppose. I think the problem we've had in the last 100 years in education is that we've anchored this student's learning with you know, a combination of spoon feeding that would be lectures. Now we put lectures on videos and they're amazing, right? Except they're still lectures. Textbooks, things that would be kind of spoon feeding with what I would call massed practice, which is like, okay, we'll do a lot of that kind of problem or do a lot of that kind of case study or something like that. So we need some different strategies for this. And so this is where these three other letters come in. So this is my student at the center, and because there's a lot of like interrelationships between these, it's hard to figure out where to start, so I just picked a place to start. So we're going to start somewhere, and you'll see that they all kind of connect. So we're going to start at the, these are all gray lines, by the way. I don't know why they're so weird on the projector, but they don't look gray, do they? So we're going to start with I. So we're going to look at this idea of interactivity, okay? And so my guess is that if I was to ask, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but if I was to ask, many of you would say, my class is highly interactive, right? Like it's not a passive experience, it's got a lot of interaction in it, okay? Like I said, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands. I always felt this way too, and then I saw some research that made me change my mind. So I'm going to show you this research. This is maps of classroom interactions. These are math classrooms, they happen to be. But I walk down halls of colleges all the time, and I can tell you it's not unique to math classrooms. And I will also warn you that once you see this, you can't unsee it. Right? Okay, so yeah, just a warning, these will haunt you. What we have here is a legend for each of these maps. The important thing to pay attention to is that stars are questions and bubbles are answers, and the instructor is a triangle, okay? So here is an example. I wonder if we can do anything about the colors on this projector. well, anyways, it's good enough, I suppose. So you can see the instructor here at the front, and there's lots of stars and bubbles, right? And a couple students here in the front row who are answering and asking some questions. And how about this second row here? How interactive is it for them? Not at all, yeah.
Is that better?
Oh, that is a little better, thank you. And then the back row, we're getting a little out of them, right? But I would say that the majority of interaction in this classroom is happening between the instructor and 3 students. The majority, in the back row, right? A little bit from the peanut gallery back there, right? Is it interactive for the instructor, though? Would the instructor leave class thinking this is an interactive class?
Yes.
Yes, that's important to note. Here's another classroom. Oh, the horse on that one. So there are a whole lot of bubbles right here. Again, I don't know why they're not. Why is this one worse than the other one? It's really strange. Let's see if there's anything over here. Can you see that one? Oh. Okay, I'll just have to. I'll have to like verbally illustrate. So there's a lot of bubbles right here. There's a lot right here, a lot right here, and a lot right here, and like none anywhere else.
Oh.
Okay, none. So this is, you can, I don't know, you can see kind of the cloud forming around this instructor. It's really quite large. This instructor also has the feeling when they leave class, this is a very highly interactive experience. But again, it's for this guy and these 3 students. What you can't read very well here is that people are falling asleep in the back row. That's particularly and then this is a third one. There is a cloud of activity right here and right here. And that's it. And everybody else is observing that conversation. The point of this is that for the instructor, it is a highly interactive experience. And if you're the instructor in your class, you shouldn't feel like you've been wrong all along if you felt it was interactive. It is interactive for you. The problem is that it's not interactive for all the students. In fact, what happens in classes is that it's typically interactive for about 3 students. And once you know that, you can't ever go to class again without recognizing which 3 students it is you interact with. And then that becomes a problem for you, which is good. It's a good problem because it forces you to kind of think about, like, all right, well, how do I get the others to start interacting? And I want to talk about why that interaction is important as well. One thing I thought I would point out here is that communities naturally form with particular ratios of participation. So we've done studies on the internet that look at communities like MySpace and Facebook and LinkedIn and whatnot. And what typically happens is you have 1% of the community that create content, about 9% of the community that share and comment on that, and then 90% of the community that just lurks. So I'm not talking about the ones who like made an account and never showed up again. I'm talking about the ones who keep coming back. They just don't post anything or like anything or comment on anything, right? You all know who that is in your community. That's my husband. He lurks. He knows everything about what's going on with everybody on Facebook, but he never posts. As a matter of fact, he butt posted by accident 2 days ago. And somebody he knows texted him and said, "Are you okay? You just posted something on Facebook." And it was an accident, actually, because that's how unusual it was. So what's interesting here is I think that the teachers are the creators. They're the ones who feel the most interaction in the classroom. Those 3 students that are interacting with them are the natural commenters and sharers. And the rest of the students sitting there are the lurkers, right? And that this happens in natural classroom communities as well. So the trick is to figure out how to get the lurkers to be more participatory. And if it feels like pulling teeth to you, that's because it naturally is like pulling teeth, okay? They are lurkers by nature. And you can change depending on the subject area. So a student who might be a sharer and commenter in one class, in one subject, might be a lurker in another subject where they feel less comfortable, right? But that doesn't mean we shouldn't get them to participate more. And so I want to show you research around that. So I want to actually just start with a fairly new research study. This is around 30,000 students enrolled in a MOOC, and they looked at participation rates both for commenting and for lurking, and they looked at persistence in terms of like, does the student stay in the class over time? And if the student viewed no threads, they were more likely to be predicted as a dropout for the course. If they viewed at least one thread a week, sorry, this side is lurkers, this side is commenters, so left is lurkers. If they viewed at least one thread a week, if they at least lurked online, they actually were more likely to stay in the class than if they didn't lurk, right? So if they at least found something interesting to look at, they were more likely to stay in. If you look at the other side, the commenters, if they made at least one post a week, they were definitely more likely to stay in the class than if they didn't. So even in online communities, we see the same kind of behavior. Okay, but why does that matter? Why is interaction important? So you guys all know of Bloom's taxonomy, right? So Bloom is actually famous for another body of research called the 2 sigma problem. Anyone familiar with that one? Okay, so the 2 sigma problem, Bloom was actually trying to show that group instruction is better than anything else. So he ran a research study, and what he found was that, he was trying to show that group work was better than everything else. What he actually found was that tutoring with mastery technique was better than everything else. Tutoring with mastery technique beat group work by 1 standard deviation. It beat traditional learning, which would be lecture, by 2 standard deviations. By 2 standard deviations, which is why it's called the 2 sigma study. Right, but this is what we continually go back to when we say, like, tutoring is so much better than lecture. Group work is better than lecture too, but tutoring is so much better than lecture. Of course, that doesn't scale, right? It would be lovely if your college could hire 5,000 faculty for 5,000 students, right? But it ain't going to happen anytime soon, right? So we have to figure out how we can get at what tutoring does without actually having the cost of tutoring. So there are a bunch of studies that look at what is it that tutoring actually does? Like, what is it that makes tutoring so special? And this is a particularly great line of research. This is the Chi study here. And what this shows is that it's actually the number of interactions that's important. It's not the content expertise of the tutor. So it turns out you could take several tutors, some of whom have content knowledge and some of whom don't. You can get the same results from the tutors who have no content knowledge as you can get from the ones who do. You just have to train them well. You have to train them to ask questions like, well, why do you think that's the case? And well, why don't you tell me more about that? And so if what the tutor does is prompt the student to think about what they know and don't know and explore the ideas on their own, then that results in equally effective tutoring as somebody with a content expert. In fact, that makes the largest difference when we look at like deep outcomes. And when I say deep outcomes, I mean like the ability to transfer what you've learned to a novel problem, to a different subject area, things like that, okay? The shallow outcomes are what we typically test in our end of term assessments, you know, like, did you learn what I set out to teach you? The deep outcomes come longitudinally across our curriculum. So explanations, if they were given up front, did not actually have a solid effect on outcomes. In the studies, it was actually if you delivered the content explanation after the student had a question. If the student has a question, they realize they're stuck, and then you deliver content explanations, that has the greatest effect on learning. It's kind of disturbing in some ways, because you think like, oh, I'm going to present the content to you, and then we're going to do some activities, and that's going to be the best possible outcome. Not so much. So there's all this follow-up research to this. This Van Lane study is interesting enough to include here. It shows that successful learning seems to actually require the students to reach an impasse. So if there is something you want students to learn, the best thing you can do for them is get them to an impasse before you teach it to them. So get them to the point where they actually want to know what the answer is, want to know what the content is, want to know what the explanation is. And then if you can get them to that impasse and teach it to them, then it does have a greater chance of sticking. Because I think if you kind of think of it like this, it's like the students open their brains to what they want to receive, and then you deliver it at that moment. Otherwise, you're kind of delivering to a blank wall of disinterest. So it's better to give them that opening first. So one of the ways that, so I, that first letter, stands for interaction and impasse. Two things that you want to get into your classes. More interaction from, and actually it can be student-to-student interaction, because as long as what they're doing is talking about what it is you're trying to teach them, and asking each other questions, and trying to figure out what they do and don't understand, that's equally effective as a content expert delivering something to them. It's more effective because they're doing it in their own language and they're reaching impasse more often that way. So one of the ways I do this in class is to do a lot of paired work with students. So students work together. I'm going to actually, I think this is a video I can play. Students actually work together at the boards as much as possible. You can certainly do this at seats too, but you'll see here just what it kind of looks like. As an observer, the beautiful thing about having students work on boards, this works nicely for things like math and chemistry and physics and economics and finance, but certainly you can do it at seats as well. The thing I like about this is that as the observer, I can actually see everybody working at once. And so they all work on the same problem. I can walk around and be a bit of a coach, but they can also look around the room and get help from each other that way as well. So it's kind of a nice strategy. We do traveling just like you guys did. So every other problem, they travel a pair and get a new partner. That avoids a lot of dysfunctional partnerships. I'm sure you guys know what I mean. You say find a partner, and the most dysfunctional people find each other, and they don't learn anything. So it's very important if you do partnered work, collaborative work, to mix up the partnerships. If you find that the starting partnerships are just always bad, then find a strategy to start everybody off with new partners at the very beginning. By posting the names people are going to work with, by passing out popsicle sticks to find your color. There's all sorts of ways you can do that, but you are the ones who control the nature of the groups, and what it requires is clear instructions and a strategy, right? And so, don't ever worry that you're not the one in control. You are. You just have to take it, right? This is my current class here. Different classroom, but you can see the same strategy. So if you're doing this, I just wanted to illustrate here, if you're doing something like this strategy here, the blue people here are all of the travelers. You can see basically what happens is they just move to the other, oh sorry, let me back up. So this person does a problem, this person does a problem, and then they travel to a new group, and we just repeat that, right? So that works well. Another strategy you can use for getting partners to work together would be having one piece of paper. Is very magical for getting partners to work together, or groups to work together. If you give everybody their own copy of something, that just gives them a reason to be in a silo. If you give only one copy for every couple people, now they have to work together to see what's on that piece of paper. Right, so if you find that you're having trouble getting your groups in your classroom to behave as a group, give them less copies. That typically results also in them asking for everybody to have their own copy, in which case you have a conversation about, okay, I'll try it next time, but if you stop working as groups, you're back to one copy again, right? And so usually you make your point and then you can go back to the way it was, and if you have to, you just make your point again. But again, you're the one in control of the situation, so you do what you have to get them to collaborate. So this is what it looks like if you constrain the responses, right? See how this group is all huddled around the same piece of paper, they're talking to each other, they're working together, right? It's a great way to get that sense of oh, we all have to work together, we don't all have our own, right? Technology done right also is a great way to deliver interaction to students. We have 3 pillars of interaction. There's interaction with the professor, there's interaction with other students, and then there's interaction with content. Reading content doesn't so much do it, but we have new technology tools in educational technology, right? That allow students to actually interact with content, and that they get questioned and they respond to that in the software that they use, right? And so I think technology done right can do this, so especially if it gets us from initial knowledge to mastery, because that's mimicking what a tutor would do, right? So if you think about this path from initial knowledge to mastery, we have some content delivery, those are the boxes. We have some misconceptions the student might hit along the way, those are the exclamation points. And then there's questions that the software might ask a student to see, like, do you understand this? Do you understand this? Do you understand this, right? So it's continually, there's a path through initial knowledge to mastery that gets them there. Now the hard thing is that if you were in a 1 to 30 situation, you can't easily do this with individual students, right? If you were on a one-on-one, if I was talking to Jennifer directly, I have all of this stuff in my head and I can work through it, right? But this is a very hard collection of materials to build, and it's not something easy for us to do individually. So, this is how a path might look through some kind of software like this. There's initial knowledge, the student gets a question, the student gets a question, the software determines they know what they're doing, they go to mastery, right? Another path through might be more windy, right, where they encounter some content along the way, some misconceptions, etc. Different student, different path. And then some are really windy, right, and circle around a couple times, which is what we know actually happens. If you've ever worked with a student one-on-one, you can see this kind of happen, where you're like, oh, let's go back over that again, right? But the point is that software can actually do this individually with students. And so when we have the opportunity to use good software, I'm not going to say that as a blanket statement, all software is good, but if you have the opportunity to work with good educational software, I think this can do a very good job of supporting more active learning in the classroom by making sure they know the content outside of the classroom. These adaptive types of products I've worked on a whole bunch of these now from various vantage points on the software side, and a typical course that's built with adaptive products has somewhere between 500 and 1,500 formative assessments in it. There is no way any of us could individually write that many good formative assessments for every class we teach. I did the estimates on this. A good question takes about 2 hours to write, proof, run through some content experts, make sure it's not just you thinking that like the whole field would believe this question is correct. And so to do one set of questions for one class would take one person working full-time for about a year, right? And so, there's a lot of folks who think, oh, I can just build my own adaptive platform for every one of my classes. It's not that easy to do a good job. You can build a set of questions, but to build that many questions to really get at all the things you would get at when you're tutoring, and these question banks are just going to grow over time. That's like a minimum problem set for an adaptive platform. So if you have access to adaptive technology to use, and it's decent technology, and it has all these formative points of contact, I would say that there's not an easy way for us to mimic that. And what you do is you then lean on that technology to deliver as much content as possible so that in the classroom you can do as much active learning as you can, as much discussion, as much students talking to each other, as much poking at their concepts as you can, where you can bring them to impasse, you can deliver these kind of, you actually have to have impasse to have an aha moment. Have you ever given that any thought? Like, we love to see aha moments, right? But to have an aha, you have to first be confused. Otherwise, there's no aha, right? So anyways, I think that the technology is important at this point. So that's that's interaction, okay? There's going to be a quiz later, so make sure you pay attention. We're going to move on to C. So I'm first going to show you one of my favorite quotes in the world. How do I get somebody to learn something that's long and difficult and takes a lot of commitment, but get them to learn it well? I think most of us feel this way about the subject we teach, whether it's chemistry or psychology or English. We want them to learn what we teach well and deeply and be able to apply it, you know, in their lives and in their other classes. This is actually a quote from a game designer about learning to play a video game. Because video games are also long and difficult and take a lot of commitment. And you want to get them to learn it well because you want to get them to play it all the way through. What I think is interesting is that our students, they know some very complicated things. I don't know about you, but I have a really hard time learning to play some of these video games, like on the PlayStation and Xbox and stuff. I mean, every game has a different set of commands for all of those buttons, right? And it's like, well, if you press the left button combined with 2 buttons combined with the up button, you kick this way, right? And it's just like combination after combination after combination, right? And they can learn all of that, right? So why can't they just learn the 3 rules I'm teaching them, right? Like, why is it so hard? It's a different kind of learning. Here, it's much more exploratory. So how do players learn games? Well, they give it a try, and then they kind of like push at the boundaries of what they know a little bit, and they try over and over, and they look for patterns. And what they've learned is the patterns that teach them how to use the buttons and all of those levelings. This is actually the same way that that young children learn. So the ones who haven't been in school yet, if you watch like toddlers and 4-year-olds, they learn the same way. They try something, they push at their boundaries, they try again and again, and they look for patterns, right? It's a very natural and fun way for us to learn. When you do this, if you're the learner in the center and you try and you push at your boundaries and you look for patterns, what happens is you end up with this whole space of what you are learning. And sometimes you come out with correct results. Sometimes you end up at impasse. Sometimes you learn all the things that didn't work, right? But you end up with this very rich space of possibilities. And you also make connections between some of them, right? The pattern finding is what you do. And so you say, well, this was very similar to this, and this was very similar to this. And you're starting to make this very rich map of connections in your head. You also get jumping off points. Even if you discover this didn't work, you've at least been down that path, and you might know what else you might try from there. You know what doesn't work, but you know what else there is to explore because you did go down that path, and you know what's there, right? So the problem that we run into now is the way we teach students is not this way. The way we teach students is, I got this from, unfortunately, a leader in a field one day. She says to me, well, it's not that difficult to teach students. You tell them what you're going to tell them, you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. Let's just say I didn't agree with that. And then you have to practice repetitively. That's how you learn. That's the recipe. Unfortunately, what that does is creates a space like this. If you tell them what you're going to tell them and then tell them what you told them, they don't have that rich space of exploration. What they have is very distinct paths that have only correctness on them, not the exploration of all the things that didn't work, not the exploration of the, I wonder what happens if. They have only what you told them to do. And that's not the same kind of learning space in their heads. And it doesn't create the same, you can only jump off of these 3 spaces, not all of those places that you had before, right? And so I think that we have a challenge to try to figure out how to create a space that looks more like that in our students' heads. If we can leverage that software to do a lot of that heavy lifting of content, then we can use our classroom time and our time with students to try to figure out how to give them these experiences of greater exploration and not these kind of boring head spaces. This is why students can't transfer things. We complain a lot, especially, well, as a math instructor, I got all the complaints from everybody across the college, right? Like, how come students can't do math in this class? And how come students can't do math in this class? And how come they can't do math in this class? Maybe if some of you are English teachers, you get the same thing, right? How come they can't write? Well, if the way we teach them is this, of course they can't transfer when they get to another subject. They've never had any experience doing it. They've never explored on their own. we think that we should teach problem solving, in fact, by like a very clear method. You see this in a lot of books, right? You understand the problem, you devise a plan, you carry out the plan, and then you look back to see if your plan was correct. But in fact, we've studied how experts in fields solve the same problems that are in textbooks. And you want to know how they solve them? Like this. Read the problem. Read it again. Write down what you hope is relevant. Draw a picture. Make a list. Try something else. See where it gets you. Read the problem again. Try something else. See where it gets you. Like the way we actually solve problems in real life is not that. Even if you're an expert. I mean, like, when I get a problem given to me, like a student says, hey, can you do this problem? The first thing I think is, oh crap, let's hope I can.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so but students don't see that. They don't see us thinking, oh crap, let's hope I can. What we do in our heads is we run through this very, very quickly. Right? We run through this very, very quickly. We try out some solutions in our head. We rely on some prior knowledge. Think, maybe I do it like this. Maybe I do it like this. There's this very quick thing that happens while we say, okay, well, why doesn't everybody read the problem carefully first? And we're like frantically thinking through everything we've ever done, right? And you know, there's points in the problem where we say, well, what do you think we should do next? And you're hoping for like either enough time to think or that the students help you out, right? The problem is we don't show this to students, but maybe we should. Maybe they should see that it's not this that we're doing. Maybe they should see that we had to try a couple iterations to get there, right? But to have the time to do that in class, you have to leverage technology outside of class to help you. You will not free up enough time to do this more robust stuff in class unless you figure out how to deliver content outside of class. All right, so there was actually there is this large body of research called the productive failure research. I think it's particularly interesting because it gets at this question of like, really, we just have to let students like try and fail, and if we want this longitudinal learning, we do. So this study, it was a study done in Singapore where such things are possible. Because what they did was they gave students an incredibly hard word problem to solve. So hard, in fact, that after 2 weeks, the students hadn't solved the problem yet. The reason I say you can do this in Singapore, not the US, is because if we gave students a word problem in the US that took 2 weeks to solve and they still hadn't solved it, how many students would be left at the end? 0. Yeah, none. Okay, so in Singapore, you can get away with this, though. So they gave half the students this very hard, it's like a 2-page word problem. I looked at it and thought the same thing I thought before, right? And then they gave the other students these like well-scaffolded lectures about specific problems and solutions for 2 weeks, right? So 2 different groups. In fact, the students in the group with the problem never got to a solution for the problem. The very last day, they did take these students and kind of run them through the basic overall concepts for the last hour, but they spent the majority of their time simply banging their heads against this problem, unproductively. So it turns out that, you know, when they tested both groups of students, they tested about the same on their concept knowledge of what they were supposed to be learning over those 2 weeks. So whether they were in the I didn't ever get the problem or whether they got them carefully scaffolded is about the same. But then long term, they did 2 things. One was they retested the students a couple weeks later. What do you suppose happened? The ones who struggled, remember, got tested higher, right? The other thing they did that was interesting was they gave the students a novel problem to solve. Something that wasn't taught to them. Something that wasn't in the carefully scaffolded set of problems. Something that required them to transfer what they had learned to a new situation. These students did much better in the novel problems. Why? Well, they created that whole space to bounce off of, right? And so the thing that's really hard about this is that short term, if all you're looking at is short term, you might think to yourself, but I don't see any difference between doing it with these more active methods and doing it with the more scaffolded stuff. And the scaffolded stuff just feels nicer. And the students like it better because it's spoon feeding, and they like spoon feeding, right? But it's not short-term that we're after, it's long-term, and there's not a great way to measure that. So short-term, yeah, they come out kind of the same. Sorry, you're not going to get incredible outcome studies short-term doing active learning. It's the long-term game you're in. So anyways, how do you get them to learn something that's long and difficult? It takes a lot of commitment to get them to learn it well. You've got to give them some space to actually explore on their own, to hit impasse on their own, to wrestle with difficult problems. You need to give them challenge and let them be curious about things, and that's hard. It requires time. You can't teach both all of the content in class and do this stuff in class. Something has to go a little bit, right? So one of the ways I like to do this is by having students do puzzles in class. And a puzzle is simply, there's a difference between a puzzle and a game. A game is something where your strategy actually affects the outcome, right? But a puzzle is something where everybody will eventually land in roughly the same place, but how they go about it might be different, okay? And so what I'd like to have you do right now is a little puzzle. So I'm going to let you work with, would you mind helping me pass these out? I'm going to have you work with a partner. So you can go back to a partner that you had before, a group of three, if you had a group of three. Thanks. And what I'm going to give you is a 4-line program. I'm going to trust that you will actually work with your partner, even though you're all getting a copy. You don't need to be a programmer, I promise.
Probably nobody in this room knows this language.
She gave us enough for everybody to have.
Yeah, so everybody gets a copy, but I will expect you to work in partners, so I'll go around and take that back.
Did y'all get a copy?
So I'm just going to give you a very basic understanding. This is 4 lines of code and the 4 outcomes that go with them. So this first line of code produced this line right here. The second line of code produced this line right here. Third line, fourth line, fourth line. What I want you to do is figure out what the words in here mean. That's your goal. Okay? It's a puzzle. Find your partner. You gotta look for patterns.
I have seen this before, but I can't remember.
Maybe it's drawing.
Three.
So the samples of certain times and the range of numbers that without
First, 1 to 3 refers to the number of
sampling without replacement.
and 1 here, 1 to 3 refers to having 3 digits. Size equals 3. I'm not sure. But then you have size equals 4, you have 4 digits there. Replace true. So if it's 3, it's false. If it's 4, it's true.
Is it all 3 different? In these 3 digits? Okay, and
Oh, 2 5.
Okay, 2, 1, 3. Okay, 2, 3. Yeah. Yeah, so your size tells you how many digits you have. Your sample of C is 253, C1, 3.
Well, get everything. Well, how come there's no size Why is that?
Yes, that's what I understand. This is line one. This is line two. Yeah.
Okay, so now I'm going to give you a task, and then I'll answer questions after the task. Okay? So the task is to write one line of code that would do this. So see if you can figure out how you would write one line of code that would do this.
Okay, so. No, your size is going to be proper. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'll give you a hint, it starts with print.
Yeah.
You can write on these, you can write on these, yeah.
Oh, I get you. We're just trying to write the code.
Okay, so what do you think? What should I start with here? Print, sample, what should go next? 1:10. 1:10, yep,
Yeah.
what numbers between 1 and 10? Okay, so that's good. And then what else do I want?
Size equals 5.
Equals 5, look at that. And then? Replace equals true. Replace equals true. We are coders. You are coders.
Okay, so
You are coders. Okay, so now, you guys probably had some other, did you have other questions?
Yeah.
In that last
Prob, yeah, so the last line is for those people who are like the math people and the coders. Prob tells you that you want, so 1 to 3 is the ratio, and so it's putting a value of 1 on the number 1 and a value of like a probability of, a probability of 25% on the number 1 and a probability of 75% on the number 2, because there's only 2 numbers in there. So you're getting 2 at a rate 3 times higher than you're getting 1. It's too much for other people, but math people, you have to keep in mind.
So that's just a way to make the sample not random.
Yes, it's making the sample not random. Exactly.
Okay.
Is everybody okay though with the other parts? This part right here? Figure it out at least.
until the size, replace
Replace means that you can resample.
resample
Yeah, so it means that numbers can repeat,
Okay.
right? So that very first line is what happens if you add no extra requirements. It's just going to give you the numbers in the space in some order, right? The second one allows those numbers in the space, but it actually comes out almost the same as the first one, but it is showing you what parameters are available. The third one starts to show you what replace means, right? Replace means you can have the numbers show up again. Replacements can happen. And then the prob is just there, like I said, to throw off the math people, keep them busy for a little while. So what we did here was I gave you just enough, right? At first, you guys, I heard some of you go, what? Right? Like, what am I supposed to do with this, right? But as you started to look at it, you did start to see patterns, right? And you started to figure it out. And I forced you to do it when I gave you a task, right? So even if you were kind of only half in the space, once there was a task, you had to be all in the space, right? You had to try to figure out how would I produce it, right? So you explored possibilities, you talked to each other, you interacted, you found patterns, right? How could I have done this instead? I could have just said, let me teach you how to program in R. There are samples, which are ranges of numbers. There is a size parameter you can use that tells you how many things to draw from the space. Replacement means blah and blah, right? I mean, I could still go through and now do a little mini lecture, but you're interested now, right? It's more, well, you're more interested.
This is actual R.
This is R code, yes. This is R code, right? So this is what I mean. This is just an example of what I mean by putting students in that space where they get challenge and they get curiosity. It's very different than me delivering a lecture to you. If you can at least get to the point where you had an impasse and you're like, I don't know what that means, you're now interested in what I have to say about it.
What does the C represent?
The C is, it's giving a weight to different numbers. So it's actually giving a weight of 1 to 3. So 25% to the first number and 75%.
So what about on the third line where the C is used there? Is it the same purpose?
Yes. Oh, sorry. Actually, no, I haven't looked at this in a while. The C is telling you to use the numbers 2, 5, and 3. And the probability is giving equal, is it giving equal weights? Okay, I have to look back at the probability.
Anytime a 2 comes up, you replace
The
it.
2 comes up 3 times as often as the 1. I remember that part. But the 2, 5, and 3 tells it which numbers to use. Look at all the questions we have. We have to go on. You can go look up some R code now. Yeah, somebody's going to do that after class now, right? Okay, anyways. What I wanted to show you about this, though, is there are other things you could do with similar ideas. Like, one of the ideas we came up with in a previous workshop was you could have a set of characters that the student uses throughout the entire course, where they get like a printout of biographies of the different characters, and throughout the course they sort the characters in different ways. Like which characters might have this disease, or if you were triaging your patients, which patients might you look at first in this situation? There's a pollution day, you know, which of your patients are going to have more problems. In every subject area, there are probably interesting patterns and interesting collections you can use across units, across the course, where you force students into patterning and re-engaging, right? So think about what those patterns might be and what kinds of things you could do to create puzzles for your students to solve, right? We like to solve puzzles. It's fun. It's harder than listening to a spoon-fed lecture, but it's fun too, and it's the thing that you remember and that sticks with you. So we should do more of it. So learning is actually the brain having fun. Another great quote from the game design industry. That is what makes video games fun, actually, is that you learn a little bit with every level you progress through. That's the fun part. So what we do should be fun too. This is just another example of encouraging curiosity. We tend in the objective subjects to have these very discrete problems that we teach. which are like, here's the situation, here's the problem. Give students room to explore outside of that. So my students have to do what's called an elaboration for every problem. So they solve the problem, but that is not enough to get full credit. They have to elaborate in some way. So they have to connect it to some other concept they've learned. They have to do something else. They choose what that something else is. So in some cases, it can be something simple like, okay, I'll check the answer. That works. They did something else. In some cases, they will draw a graph. This is the same problem. But they draw a graph. They also check the solutions. And sometimes they write novels about what they're doing. The problem is actually up here. This is the novel that happened after the problem, where they looked at, well, what would happen if I squared things differently? Does it actually work, or does it not work, right? So think about whether there are open exploration spaces around what you teach. Are there ways that you can encourage students to step outside of exactly what they were asked to do into the space of, I will take a look around what I was asked to do and find something else to do. So C stands for curiosity and challenge. What did I stand for again? Interaction and impasse. Good. So we're up to curiosity and challenge. And now we're going to go into D, which stands for durable learning. And so we talked a little bit about information transfer. What we actually want to get to is more knowledge retrieval. So rather than pouring in information, we want to actually fish around and see what's in our students' heads instead. The more we fish for the information, the more likely it is that the information sticks there. Durable learning, right. So I'm going to actually ask you to pull out your cell phones for a second. And I have a website up here on the screen that I want you to go to in your web browser on your phone. I have it on a piece of paper too. If you can't read that in the back row, I can give you a piece of paper to find it with. Are you guys okay in the back row, or you good? Okay. It's actually going to be a different question that you pull up on your phone. But this is the right address right here. You should get a graph when you pull it up on your phone. Is that working? Mm-hmm. Good. All right. So when you get that graph, your job is to press on the graph where you think the answer is.
It's hard to get the exact spot.
There is no exact right. Roughly right is fine.
It says
I don't know. I don't have my. Yeah, 5:30.
you just got it screen.
So I'm going to show you the results here. I'm afraid that again, the color is coming out a little bit weird, so I'm going to have to show you where the curve is. So the curve is here. So some of you have points clustered around the downslope, and some of you have points clustered around the bottom. So I'm going to give you a second now to talk to the person next to you. See if you can decide, is it this group of points or this group of points that's correct?
If you're going from actually, they don't do that. Have that.
Okay, so I'm gonna clear the poll results and let you do it again.
So where's the answer?
It was so hard to get that. Oh, you don't, it's okay. Although it should be in your browser history now, so you can do it again if you want.
See when it's below the line, it's in negative. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's an example of another way to get at impacts, challenge, and curiosity, but I'm also doing knowledge retrieval, right? Suppose I had just taught you about this like a couple days ago, and now I'm checking to see if we still have the concept, right? But with this platform, this poll everywhere, you can do multiple choice questions, you can do open-ended questions, and everything else. It's pretty easy to go to this. The students can actually bookmark it once you've given them that URL, and then you can just keep going back. You can just keep delivering questions of that same URL, right? So once they've got it in their phones, you can essentially use their cell phones as clickers, right? You won't record which student is doing what unless you sign up for a class use, but you can use it for free. If you just wanted to get at this one thing, which is, are you guys with me or not, right? So just for closure here, the answer is actually this.
I don't understand.
So watch. This is going to represent the slope. So the slope is decreasing here. It continues to decrease here, right? And then it starts to increase after this point, right? It's getting less steep. So this is a negative, you have to remember positives and negatives from slopes, right? This is a very negative slope right here. But it's approaching 0, so it is increasing to 0 and then increasing after that. So the reason it's here is because it's decreasing to the most negative and then increasing after that, right? Many of you are probably thinking, where is this function at its minimum? Which would be down here, right? So slope was the important word. You could use questions like this to get at knowledge retrieval. Like, is the knowledge actually in there solidly enough, or do we need to bang it around a little bit? Let me give you So there was that question. So again, I would encourage you to explore some ways you can use to actually ask questions to students in class, get interaction back from all of them, not just the 3 students I normally interact with, right, but all of them. Even once a student has committed to an answer, they are more invested in hearing what you have to say about it, because they want to know whether they're right or not. And if they're wrong, they want to know why they're wrong, right? But until they committed to an answer, they weren't interested. I mean, they're at class, but they have distractions, right? All right, so I do want to take a brief look at cognitive science. Cognitive science is a very big field, but I do want to make you aware of one particular thing from cognitive science that I find interesting in light of what we have to do with students. We have one part of cognitive science says that there are 2 types of knowledge. There are other theories here, but the one I'm going to look at looks at declarative and procedural knowledge. So declarative knowledge is like the facts you know, procedural knowledge connects processes and steps for processes. In particular, what I want to talk to you about are schemas, which are mental representations. And a schema is what we do, we make schemas when we do pattern finding. So what you guys did with the little coding activity, you found patterns like, okay, size equals 3, size equals 4, size equals 10, I'm finding a pattern, right? So you're essentially forming some kind of schema about how things work from that. It's a simple way of looking at it. The plural of that is schemata. So what's interesting here is that students form these very naturally. They do it through their whole lives, and they come to us in college with these things already in their head. You have to kind of have a sense that they're already there. So this is an example from math, because I used to teach math, so it's just easier. So we're taking something from the outside and applying it to the inside. What rule is this for math?
Distributive property.
Distributive property. Okay, so this is the distributive property.
It looks like
The problem with this, and this is probably what it looks like roughly in students' heads. It's like arcs of things happening, like I'm applying something to something else. The problem with this happens because students, when confronted with a new situation, say they have a power up here, they just go, oh, I'm going to apply it to the inside, right? Which doesn't actually work. Or in chemistry, for those of you who are chemistry instructors, just think about, in chemistry you take coefficients and make them subscripts as you combine chemicals together. How weird is that to students when they're used to this pattern, right? So they take these powers and they apply them inside when they and so what we have to do is try to combat these schemata that are in their heads. They're very hard to get rid of once they're there, and they form very naturally. So, you know, these two situations, this one does feel like distribution to students, but you put a plus there and all of a sudden it's not distribution, right? Not what they think is distribution. It doesn't even work remotely the same anymore, right? So if their schemata doesn't include what the sign is in the schemata, then it's going to keep executing incorrectly over and over and over and over, right? And until you do something to help them confront what's different about this new situation, it's very problematic. And this is one of the reasons why we want to include activities and examples that get at comparisons and contrasts. So no matter what the subject area is, you want students to look at, like, you know, a number of case studies or a number of examples where they have to compare and contrast the small differences between things. Because it's in those small differences that the schemata become more well-formed. So what we often do, unfortunately, is, remember I said at the beginning, we anchor what students learned with spoon feeding and masked practice. And this is an example of masked practice. When we teach exponent rules in books, this is what we tend to do. We teach you this new rule, and then we have you do a bunch of problems where you just apply the rule. You don't apply that looking thing to old situations, you just apply it to new situations. And when we do that, we don't ever get at that contrast. Right? So this is called masked practice. This one would be varied practice. See the pluses in there and the coefficients in front? This one gets at, do you understand the new rule with some of those older conditions now in place? So this is varied practice. This one is masked practice. In every field, you have something like this. You teach a new condition, and maybe that new condition, you look at 3 patients, and you say, okay, which patient has this condition? What you need to do is bring in all sorts of older conditions too, right? Like, okay, here's this new condition and these 3 older conditions. Let's do all of them together, especially if you can pick conditions where they seem very similar in symptoms, right? We want students to develop the nuances to tell the difference between what they think they know and what they actually know. So when we engage in this varied practice, what we're hoping to do is take the schemata that we had and add to it this very important fact that this only works when there's a plus or minus in there. And it doesn't work if there's not a plus or minus in there. It doesn't apply in those cases. Yeah?
Do you first have them practice it, do it the masked way, and then move to the varied, or do you do the varied from the very beginning?
I think it really depends. It's a great question. I think it really depends on the level of the student. Like, there are things I would do with second-year students I wouldn't do with first-year students, right? I think with like a first-year students, new to college students, I would probably do a little bit of masked and then move into varied. right? I would just cut back the amount of mask practice.
I mean, it seems to me you kind of have to get the new thing sort of set in your head as to what it is
Yeah.
that we're looking at before we can look at the nuances.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the subject, the students, and how much practice they're going to need overall to get it, right? And that does depend quite a bit on the subject area, right? And you guys are the ones who know best, I think, what the ratio is to use. And you're going to have to kind of like give it a gut check to start and say, all right, I think it should be this, and then see how it works, and then shift, talk to each other, talk to people in your subject area, right? But I do think it's important that we hit both. And I think too much of the time we just hit the mass practice because we're trying so hard to get through the content. It's like, okay, that's all I have time for is to get through this. So like I at least cut my mass practice in half and do some varied practice on top of it. Because otherwise they don't make these connections. Another thing that we should probably be better about is making sure that we interleave concepts throughout courses. So one of the things that you should do when you're designing a course is think about, like, what are the big overall competencies or objectives that I have for this course, right? There are maybe 4 or 5 statements for a 3-credit course that are like the big things I want students to walk away with. I want them to be better problem solvers. I want them to be better writers. I want them to be able to make a coherent argument. I want them to be able to diagnose patients. Like whatever it is that you're, maybe we're not diagnosing patients at community colleges yet, but you know, whatever it is you want students to have, there should be some large overarching themes in your course. Whatever those large overarching themes are, they should actually, so these are some examples from one of my courses, whatever those overarching themes are, you should actually be hitting those throughout the entire course, right? So, for example, if one of my overarching themes is, overarching or overarching? Who's an English person? Arching. Overarching themes is, for example, I want students to be able to connect graphs with equations. Then I should do that in every unit. I should make sure that in every unit they have the opportunity to connect graphs and equations, no matter what the new topic is, right? And if what I want them to be able to do is write coherent paragraphs, then I need to make sure that they do that throughout the entire term, not just in one unit of the term, right? So you want to make sure, this is called interleaving. So you want to make sure you interleave the big theme throughout the course. And that takes some doing sometimes. If you look at your course through a very critical eye and say, you know, these are my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things I want students to learn. Are they actually doing those 5 things during every unit of my course, right? And I think that most of us, when we look at it that way, we discover that they aren't actually doing those 5 things in every unit, and that maybe we need to make some adjustments. One of the things that I like about looking at it through this perspective is it often tells me what to throw out of a course. Sometimes our courses get very bloated with content. And so when you're trying to decide what to remove, if you look at it through this lens, you can say, turns out that that particular topic, it doesn't hit any of my 5 main themes. Maybe I should include this theme I wasn't including and get rid of that little detail, right? Because you want them to walk away with the big things. That's all they're really going to walk away with. So this last category here is durable learning. We talked about 3 things: getting knowledge retrieval somehow in your course, making sure that there's varied practice, and then interleaving of concepts. So, I guess no quiz, I didn't have a blank one. So those are the 3 biggies, right? Interaction and impact, challenging curiosity, durable learning. You can't do it all at once. I find it kind of funny because I go and give these talks, and every time I give this talk, I feel like my class is a little bit worse than it was before. It's like, oh, I'm not doing this well enough, I'm not doing this well enough. But this is a journey we're all on, right? It's a journey of 1,000 steps. So what you do is you say, you know what? One of these really resonated with me. I really want more challenge in my class, or I really want more knowledge retrieval in my class, or whatever it is. And you take the first step on that journey, and you take another step every term, right? And eventually you have the world's most amazing course, and everybody around you is impressed and amazed, but it is a journey and it takes a lot of time. So what I hope is that you'll come away with this, with something that seems interesting to you to try, maybe a few somethings, a short term and a long term, that will move you forward on this path to trying to help students learn better, learn in a way that's not quite as, that is deeper and more cross subject. And that is everything. So, thank you.
Do you all have any questions for Maria before we take a break? Because at 11 o'clock we'll start the Secret Technology Club. So, Randy?
Yeah.
Seems to me that a lot of textbooks are written not following the research in terms of cognitive, how people learn.
Well, it's a textbook.
I mean, so is that true? Is it like most textbooks are?
A textbook is a textbook. It's passive learning, right? So
But
I think
it also, it's like you were saying, a lot of it's math, the math practice is not the other kind.
yeah, it depends on the textbook. I've seen some textbooks that do a great job of varied practice, and some that do a lousy job. But the newer software that's coming out that's like the digital textbooks, a lot of that has great knowledge retrieval. The smart books, the MindTap software, the Sumo, Smart Sparrow. There's a lot of different products now in the market which like both deliver the content and let the students practice as they go through, as they're reading, right? Which I think is a much better experience than like saying, here's the textbook, read it. I mean, I don't know about you, but if I give a textbook to students and tell them to read it, nothing happens. Anyone have a different experience? I mean, there has to be something active about it.
Like they read it, but I'm not sure that much else is happening when they read it. Are they
I'm not even sure they're reading it.
I
mean, actually, in math we know that actually students don't read a textbook. They wait till they don't know how to do a problem, and when they don't know how to do a problem, they go in and read the appropriate text that matches the problem type. I think it's very similar in the sciences. I don't know, in like English, literature, psychology, are they reading the textbook up front?
No.
No? So anything we can do that gets them at knowledge retrieval during that reading process, I think is good. I think we have software for that now, and the software is getting better and better over time. I'm not going to say it's like where I would want it to be yet, but I have high standards.
Next question?
Oh, sorry, back here first.
Oh, okay. You had mentioned tutoring with mastery technique.
Yeah.
Are you sort of alluding to professional tutors?
So in those studies, it was actually not professional tutors. They were just like peer students who were trained. Peer-led, yeah. So what tutoring to mastery just means is that you continue to work with the student until they are able to show you they understand it. I mean, tutoring every student would be great, but we can't afford to do it, right? So the goal there is just, if students actually talk to each other, they are in a manner tutoring each other in the same way that a tutor would. They're asking each other questions, they're explaining in their own words. It is the act of explaining it to somebody else and talking about it that actually leads to the learning. So the more we can do that, it seems a little counterintuitive, but the more we can make them talk about it, the better.
Maria, did you say that the non-content expert tutors, students did as well as the content expert
yes,
students?
if they were trained, non-content experts can do as well as the content experts. There's a great TED Talk about the granny cloud. If you haven't seen it, go watch the TED Talk on the granny cloud.
Granny cloud.
Yeah, they had grandmothers who knew nothing about any of the subjects, tutor students in India through a video, and all the tutors did, all the grandmothers did were saying, oh, why don't you tell me more about that? What do you think about that? Why do you think that might be wrong? They knew nothing about the subject area, but it worked. Somebody paid attention to them and made them talk about it. That's what mattered. You had a question?
Because I know that there's a huge gap in my understanding of
I repeatedly encounter students in my class that are very eager to engage that way. But often there are 3 or 5, or depending on how incalcitrant they are, it kind of expands, that will not. They just leave me alone, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys heard the question over here. Did you hear it? You want me to repeat it?
No, repeat it.
So the question is, what do you do when you have those students who are just do not want to engage in things like interaction? You know, there are always a couple of students who don't want to participate, they don't want to work in a group, they don't want to be active. So one, I would say I try to not give them a choice. So, for example, when we do the paired board work, the very first day of class, I don't say we're going to get up and work at the board. I say, kind of like I did to you guys, I say, everybody stand up, and I wait till everybody stood up. Everybody walk to where the whiteboards is. Everybody walks to where the whiteboards is, right? Okay. You know, turn to somebody next to you. There, you know, so one of the things I do is I control the situation. I don't give them a chance to start like bailing, right? I give them one paper for several people, so they don't get to be their own island, right? It is very real that in the workplace of today, they're going to have to communicate with each other. There are students for whom this will be hard. There are students for whom it is hard to work by themselves, right? And so sometimes I've had to pull a student to the side and just have a conversation with them about what it means to participate in class. But I would say that the most important thing is to control the situation. Like to just have very clear directions to use your techniques in your toolbox. Like, okay, that didn't work, you didn't participate this time, fine. Next time I will have arranged groups, right? Like, you know, you are the one who is ultimately in control of it. You might not be every day, but over time you are the one in control, right? I had some interesting situations. You know, I had a student who's autistic in class one semester, and at the end of this, it was very hard for him at first to do this kind of group, like the paired board work. By the end of the semester, he was actually grateful for the opportunity to interact. One of the things I do with students for the first like full 2 weeks of the semester is every time they have a new pairing, I say, you know how I said to you, introduce yourselves? I do it to them too. I say, you know, it's always good to start by introducing yourself to your partner. That looks like this. Hello, my name is, right? And that kind of like breaks the ice for them. Like they can do this silly thing their teacher made them do. They can shake hands and introduce themselves. Now they're talking to each other, right? So you can do things that will kind of break the ice. But, you know, it's that 1-9-90 rule. It is going to be like pulling teeth for some students. 90% of us naturally lurk. That doesn't mean that that's the right thing to do in a learning situation. So you have to be kind of strong. I don't know if that helps or not, but. Other questions? I'll stay here and answer some questions. I do want you to have a chance to go get some coffee, use the bathroom, whatever you need to do before we come back at 11.
We'll come back at 11 o'clock. And there's snacks out there. Thanks again, Randy.
So can you explain what the next activity is again?
So the next segment, we're going to do something called the Secret Technology Club, which is like a collection of tips and tricks for using the internet, software, etc., where you might know half of them, but probably you don't know all of them.
If you didn't get a chance to sign in, please do that up here. Thank you.
Are those lights down or do they come back on? They're down.
They're down.
They're down? Okay. All right, are you good, Yolanda? Or tell us when you're ready?
Yes,
It's still loading. She's just,
yeah, I got it. I got it.
we're good. Okay, thank you all for coming back. And we're doing the Secret Technology Club.
Yes, so the Secret Technology Club. So this presentation came out of an experience I had over many years. I taught this 5-day technology workshop for faculty. And we would bring faculty in and teach them how to do everything they needed to do to teach online over a week. And what we discovered was that there were every one of us has these like places where we're missing a little bit of knowledge, but we don't know we're missing it, so it's never occurred to us to ask. And there would be these moments during that week that everybody would call their money moment, where they'd be like, oh my gosh, it was worth the whole price of coming just to learn that right there, right? So what I did was I took a whole bunch of those tips, a whole bunch of those money moments, and put them into one presentation, because what it will do is fill in gaps. Now, for some of this stuff, you'd be like, yep, I know that one, yep, I know that one. Then you'd be like, oh my gosh, really? Right, so hopefully everybody has at least one money moment, and usually somebody will share a few things with me during this, where I get to have my money moment, and I'm like, wow, I didn't know that one. So the goal of this is not that it's going to be like 100% new, but it's to that, like, where you have a gap somewhere that you didn't know you had, you'll like get it filled, okay? So we actually go back to, we're going to go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 areas. The internet browsers, search, using Windows. I actually use a Mac, but we'll go through some Windows tips so I can give you Mac. Is anyone in here a Mac user? A couple? Okay, so I'll try to give you a couple Mac tips too. And then a couple editing tips, and then some tips for mobile, because, you know, we all have mobile devices now. So we'll start with the internet in general. And so first off, behind the entire internet, there is this thing called HTML. HTML, in case you didn't know, is hypertext markup language. It's important to know that this is behind everything, because there's also something called WYSIWYG. And WYSIWYG is what you see is what you get. So most editors that you use, like in Blackboard, like the Word editor is a WYSIWYG editor. When you click bold, things look bold, right? So what you see is what you get. It's important to know that you have both of these systems, because in most programs that you have a way to actually edit the HTML. Sometimes it looks like 2 brackets, because HTML code is often surrounded by 2 brackets, right? So you can switch back and forth between the back-end code, and this right here is a WYSIWYG editor, which means that when you click bold, you see bold, etc. Right? So just know that there are kind of 2 views of everything on the internet. So the next thing is that there's a difference between a website and the name of a website. So the website actually has the extension on it, so like busynessgirl.com would be the website, but when we talk about the name of a website, we just talk about the name, like it's Busyness Girl or it's CNN. Right, CNN.com is actually the website. So there's a distinction between those 2 things. There's also a distinction between a website and a URL. A URL, anyone know what that one is? Universal Resource Locator, right? It's like the address, you find something, so it's like addressing an envelope. It starts with HTTP. Anyone know that one? Hypertext Transfer Protocol, very good. So the website doesn't have that HTTP in front of it, but the URL does, right? And sometimes you see HTTPS, which is secure, right? So you look for that when you're putting in your credit card information, right? But do know that when somebody says they need a URL, they actually need it with that part, right? So sometimes when you're filling out forms and things like that online, if you miss this part, it doesn't take it in the form, it doesn't work, right? And so then you might start to think, well, what's with that www anyways? We used to put that in front of everything, right? And now we don't anymore. Well, it turns out that most web browsers are now built, and most websites are now built so that these are interchangeable. So if you don't have a www, it can go find it, or if you do, it can remove it. Like it sees them as the same thing.
It used to be there because in the early days of the internet, you were distinguishing between a World Wide Web page and some other types of resources, but that's just not needed anymore. Plus, we're on mobile now, right? That's a lot of extra letters to type in on mobile, and it really sucks to say too, right? www dot. Okay, anyways, so we have the website up here, that's busynessgirl.com. When you go to a web page, what you see in that URL at the top is you first see the web where all the pages are located, where the collection of pages is. And then if you go all the way through to the end, that's sending you to the specific web page, right? So you can always look at this URL up here and see the specific web page and the source of the web page, right? So that's good information to know. There's also a difference between a website and a hyperlink. So the website might be something like this. The hyperlink is the thing you click on that sends you to a website. Best practice for a hyperlink is not to have the whole HTTP thing there. This is what the screen reader would actually read to somebody if they were browsing and they needed web accessibility. So you should actually take off the .com and the HTTP part when you're making a hyperlink and just link to it as if it was the web name. So that's the site, that's the hyperlink. To create a hyperlink, you see a variety of different ways to do that in programs. Sometimes it's a world with a link. Sometimes it's just a link like this. This breaks the link. This one, where is it on now? Oh, this one's just the world, right? So you can create a hyperlink in most programs. You can also remove it in most programs. But what you have to do usually first is select the words you want to make the hyperlink on, and then add the hyperlink to it after that, right? So that's typically the process, no matter what the program is. So those are the buttons you press after you select. Okay, so do also pay attention when you're looking in programs. Sometimes, like when it says your address, it's actually looking for the URL, not the website, right? So pay attention to whether, when something fails on you in a form or something like that, pay attention to whether or not that HTTP part is needed or not. Like, for example, some forms come with the HTTP part, whatever, that part already in it, right? And so if that's already in it, you have to be careful that you either like highlight over it before you paste your URL in. If you don't, you end up with two HTTPs in the address, and then it fails, right? So for example, like this, right? Sometimes you get a website somebody sends you, or a URL somebody sends you, and they've got like too many of these in there, right? And so then you click on it and it doesn't work, right? So you've just got to remove one of them. Sometimes people will send you a website with an S on it because they were logged in at the time when they got the URL. Most web browsers can kind of like try them both out, but occasionally you'll go to a website where it just fails completely. So before you send them back an email that says this website doesn't work, you should always try first just removing the S to see if it works without the S, right? And then often that works and you're done, right? I thought I would give you a few tips on broken links. Sometimes you get a link that's broken, and there are some very easy ways to fix it. So for example, this is a broken YouTube link, but you can back up to, see this @ symbol right here? @ is a commonly used character in URLs, @ and question marks, which give you parameters, right? So everything after that is just parameters on this. So if you back up to just the orange part here, this video will play. So even if the parameters are throwing out errors, you can sometimes get back to a URL that's playable by removing the parameters. In fact, you may want to remove parameters if you're sharing something like oh, I saw this great article, right? You guys gotten these? Oh, I saw this great article. You should look at it. I never share those directly from the source because the source contains, marketers. They want to have all of the information about what site you were on, where you got the link, and so that's all being recorded in all of this junk here, right? So when you get like an article via email or something like I see it over here, when you get an article by email or from social media or something like that, it's adding all of this stuff so that marketers can track how you got there. If you want to share this with students or a colleague or something like that, personally,
I go in and I remove everything. See that question mark right there? That's the first set of parameters that's been added on, right? So I go back and I remove all the junk. I double check it to make sure it works with just the first part, and that's the part I put in my LMS, or I send it an email, or I send to a friend, right? And now I'm genius, there we go. Somebody had their moment, right? So you don't have to have all of this junk. It is just junk. It's just tracking junk, okay? So yeah, especially if you're putting these in LMSs and things like that, none of this is all meaningless. It's not even good data, right? For the marketing team, they're not really all getting it from the path that you sent it from. Okay, you can also shorten a URL. So if there's just a really long URL and you want to give a shorter one out, like at a conference or something, there are URL shorteners. One commonly used one is bit.ly, B-I-T-L-Y. So you basically take a long URL, you plug it into this box, and you hit shorten, and it spits out something much shorter. All it's doing is creating a pointer, a permanent pointer on the internet, so that anybody who types this in forever and ever will get this link. Right? If you create an account with them and sign in, you can even see like, how many people clicked on that link, how many people followed it, etc. So if you actually want to know how many people are clicking on that link you put into Blackboard or whatever, you use Blackboard here?
Yeah.
But, so if you actually want to know how many of your students click on that link in Blackboard, you could actually route it through something like bit.ly and then look at the data on bit.ly to see how many students in the last week clicked on it, right? You won't know who did what, but you might know actually how well used it is. Okay, so that's the internet. So we're going to go to browsers next. And I just have to tell you that I found the most beautiful animation this morning of browsers on the internet. This is the path that browsers have taken over the last 20 years. This is Netscape right here, which died at some point. And this is the new mobile, the new mobile cloud over here. It's evolution of web.appspot.com. It's fantastic. You can look at any one of these paths. But anyways, I had this graphic from 5 years ago. These were all the browsers we were still talking about 5 years ago. I thought it was amusing, so I thought I'd leave it. Because really now we only really talk about 3 browsers, at least in the software development, these 3. We talk about Chrome, Firefox, and oh yeah, Internet Explorer. Okay, and Safari. Yeah, Safari probably too, but not very much. The 2 browsers that everybody develops for is pretty much Firefox and Chrome because they work on both PCs and Macs. They are considered the primary use browser of the internet. Internet Explorer, I would say for education more than Safari because most people in education, most schools are still using Windows. So they have to support Internet Explorer.
What about Edge, Microsoft's new one?
Oh yeah, Microsoft's new one. Well, we'll see if it persists or not. There have been plenty of new browsers over the last 20 years that have not persisted. Anyone remember, I think there was one called Rockmelt? Rockmelt? It was Facebook's browser. It was going to be awesome. We were all going to use Facebook's browser. Yeah, clearly that one didn't catch. So anyways, you should always, when you have something that's not working, a form that doesn't work, a website that doesn't work, anything that doesn't work, before you send for help, you should always try it in a different browser. Because sometimes they just don't work in one browser. It's bad design, it shouldn't happen, but it does happen.
Can you put a call into Pearson with that statement?
Yes, totally. So, some other things about browsers. Browsers have these things at the top that are called tabs. You can move between tabs by pressing Control-Tab. So if you just press Control-Tab, you will bounce between the tabs in your browser. It's very nice. If you want to add a new tab, you can press Control-T, and that just pops you into a new tab. So on a Mac, that would be Command-T. And so that just opens a new one. These little icons at the top, just in case you're ever wondering what those are called favicons. Favicons, there's it's kind of like GIFs and GIFs, which, how do you pronounce it? But anyways, those kind of give you a sense for what the tabs are. Now, you can also have separate windows for all of these things, right? So some of you may be living in a world where you keep opening a new window every time, but it is probably easier to navigate by tabs most of the time. I thought I would point out that, let's see, you can choose when you click on something. You can choose whether you want a window or a tab in case you weren't aware. So when you're on a link on the internet, if you right-click it or on a Mac command-click it, you can choose whether you want to open the link in a new tab or a new window. That's nice because sometimes you're being forced to do it one way or the other, but you don't have to be forced. You can choose. You just have to take that extra step of right-clicking. You can also drag something that's not in your tabs to your tabs, or remove it by dragging it out. So if you want to have one of these tab things in a separate window, just pick up the tab and drag it out. If you don't want it to be separate anymore, just pick up the tab and drag it back. You can also rearrange the tabs, so you can pick up this tab and move the order, right? So you can, yes, really. There we go. There was the moment, yes. You really can. So like I, for example, typically have my email sitting in the first tab and then like my Drive folder sitting in the second tab, and if it ever moves, I just drag it back to where it needs to go, right? Yeah, so you can totally rearrange the tabs. Just pick them up and move them. It's fantastic, right? Okay. So also important to note that there is a button here to close everything, and then on the tab there is a X that closes just the tab. So sometimes you're talking to somebody on the phone, they're like, but everything disappeared. They're probably not catching that there's a difference between those two X's, and you might need to explain that, okay? There's also a minimize and a maximize here, so you can minimize or maximize to the whole screen. On the Mac, of course, it's on the opposite side, because you know, why would it be on the same side? It's a Mac. Okay, here's a biggie. On almost every web page on the internet, and in a lot of programs as well, you can magnify the text on the screen by hitting Control plus. And every time you hit plus, the magnification gets a little bigger. And how would you go backwards? Control minus. How do you go back to the default state? Zero. Control
I made
zero.
that on the spot.
Control zero. So if you've magnified a bunch and you want to go back to the default state, hit Control zero. On a Mac, it's just all command. Command plus, command minus, command zero. I find that command zero is very helpful because sometimes, so again, before you call tech support, if you have been zooming in and out on something, go back to the default state, do that Control zero, try it one more time, then call tech support if it still doesn't work. But often, some programmer somewhere has not considered the possibility that people magnify their text, and it just doesn't work if the text is magnified. And it will work. That doesn't mean it's not wrong and shouldn't still be pointed out to somebody, but at least you get the program to work the way it should. So command zero is pretty cool. So we can shrink the page. Okay, so here's another one that's really, really useful. There's a command for finding. It's Control F or Command F. It works in almost everything, not just web browsers, but in like Word, Excel, like almost any program you have. If you type Control F, it will open a little box, which you can't see on here, but it'll open a little box in the corner and it'll search the page. So even in the web, this is important. You may have done a search to get to this page, but now you need to find the word on the page because it's like 20 pages of text. Right, so when you get to the page, you do a quick Control F, you type what it is you're looking for, and actually on the right-hand side of the screen, it will often mark with little bars where it's finding it in the text. So you can actually scroll right to where that happens, or you can use Tab to go to where those things happen. So Control F is super, super useful in a lot of programs. And I found that students are so on even knowing this exists. So other things you can do, you can customize your web browser, so you can add all sorts of little extensions to your web browser. Be careful about adding too many because they start to fight with each other after a while. But I thought I would point out a couple that you might find useful. These are called extensions in Google, add-ons if you're in Firefox, and plugins if you're in Internet Explorer. I don't know what they are in English, but maybe they have a different name. One I think is useful. It used to be called Readability, but now it's called the Mercury Reader. What it does is you click the button, and it takes a web page with a lot of junk on it, and it cleans it up and gives it to you just in a readable format.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It is kind of awesome. So you literally go to any web page that, you can go to a CNN web page, a Chronicle web page, whatever pages you go to that are just full of ads and junk, and you just click the button and it redelivers you the web page without all the junk. So it's called the Mercury Reader.
It's a rocket?
What?
Is that a rocket?
It's a rocket, yes.
That's a browser add-on?
It's a browser add-on, yeah. It works. You can get it from mobile too.
Is it on Safari?
Is it what?
On Safari?
I don't know if it's on Safari or not.
Well,
There you go.
readability was on Safari.
Yeah, readability wasn't. Mercury just kind of subsumed readability, so.
So we
Yeah.
have to load that ourselves?
You just load it into your browser, and then after you've loaded it into your browser, you can just click on it and you get a readable version. It's kind of awesome. Useful. Yes? Another useful one is Social Fixer. For those of you who use Facebook and are really tired of seeing all the political junk, you can actually filter out all the political junk if you'd like to, or whatever. Maybe you don't like recipes and you're just done with them. Or babies. You're just done with babies. Anyways, whatever you would like to filter out, there's a little browser extension called Social Fixer. You have to install it in your web browser. And then you choose what words you would like to never see again on Facebook.
But it doesn't work with cats.
So you can they actually have a preset. Look at the very top preset here. Hide politics. That tells you something, right? So anyway, Social Fixer is very nice. If you like being able to socialize with your friends, but you have had it with something in particular that you just cannot see anymore, you can make it go away. If you are a Twitter user, you can do the same thing with TweetDeck. TweetDeck allows you to install filters as well to remove certain words from your timelines. One other program that I find invaluable on my browser is a password manager. You have 5 bazillion passwords and you have to manage them all. They're all supposed to be different and they change all the time. You can actually install something. I use 1Password, but there are several programs like this. Basically, when I go to a website, I just choose, you log into it periodically, it'll log you out if you haven't logged in that day. You choose the website and it just puts in your usernames and passwords for you. That way they can all be different and it manages all of them for you. So you just remember the one to get in and it remembers all the rest for you. So, yeah.
Does it choose them for you? Because I've thought about using this.
You can either write them yourself or you can have it choose for you.
Okay.
So I tend to use like the 10 digits with characters, and I just let it choose, and that way they're all different and complicated, and I don't have to worry, like if one site gets hacked, all my passwords don't go down at the same time.
So 1Password you like?
Yeah, I really like this. I use it on my mobile devices and my computer, but there are other flavors of this.
So if you get this, then let's say I wanted to log on to online, say my online banking.
Mm-hmm.
I would use one master password and then it would know to go to the real one.
1Password, so 1Password is the program.
Yeah.
You use a master password for that.
Yeah.
Your password, whatever it is, right? Your secure thing that you know. Then it will start to just notice, because it's installed in your browser, it will just start to notice every time you put in a username and password, it'll say, do you want us to remember this for you? Log in, so we're sure you're you, and then we'll add it to your list, right? And so as you log into new things, it'll say, would you like us to remember this? You can go and have it generate your passwords for you. So it basically acts as a spreadsheet, if you would, on the back end that just stores all your usernames and passwords for you.
So then,
I have like 500 usernames and passwords at this point.
but when you subsequently log into a site that's password protected, does it just populate?
Yeah, I'll just show you. So it's really clever. So you go to a website. I do something brave here and go to Amazon. God knows what's on my Amazon page. So you just click on the browser extension, right? It pulls up the vault. You type in your password to your vault. And then once that's there, it'll say, oh, look, I have an Amazon login. If I clicked this, it would log me in. I'm already logged in. But if I clicked this, it would just fill in the information and log me in.
Okay, got it.
Right? And then you can also go and just look at all of your logins. Here are all of my logins. You don't realize how many you have until you start managing them.
No.
Yeah, it's really bad. But at least this way they can all be different.
right? And you don't have to worry that if like Yahoo gets hacked, everything else got hacked at the same time. So it's, and you can have that vault extend to your phone, and you just always requires you to log into it.
And that's also a browser plugin?
Yeah, it's also, this is the browser plugin right here.
Okay.
That way it can
Okay.
detect what you're putting usernames and passwords into. It always will ask you.
And it works across browsers?
Yes, it works across browsers. Yep. Okay, so that's useful, I think. So next we'll go to search, searching things on the internet. Just so you know, the order of words matters in search. So depending on the order you put in, you will get 3 completely different search results. So if you're not getting what you want, try changing the order of your words. That sometimes helps. Also, sometimes putting something in quotes will help. Like, I was actually looking for a history of YouTube when I typed these things, and I couldn't find it, but then putting it in quotes started to give me the sites that were about the history of YouTube, instead of just YouTube video histories. If you are looking for an exact spelling, just put it in quotes so that it doesn't get corrected automatically. The browsers correct automatically for bad spelling. Why do you suppose? So if you want something that's an odd spelling, make sure you put it in quotes. You can use autofill search results. If your word's aware, you can just arrow. You can use your down key and arrow to the one you want and hit enter. You don't have to type in the whole thing or click on it. Just use your down arrow and hit enter. You can exclude a word from search. So if you want to exclude a word, just put a minus sign in front of it. So like if you're coming out with a search that has a lot of like words that just aren't appropriate to your search. Like if you search, for example, for Jaguar, you will get a lot of cars. But maybe you don't want the cars. So then you could do minus, who makes Jaguar?
Jaguar.
Okay, that's not going to work. So you can do minus cars, right? And then that'll pull out all of those from your search. So make sure there's no space there. Just use a minus. It'll remove something from the search. Okay. You can also search within a website. You type the name of the website and a colon. I think now in the browsers you can actually use a space. You start typing it. It recognizes it, you just hit space, and then you can type what you're searching for in that website. So you don't actually have to anyways, you can search within just that website this way, right? So if you know which website you're aiming for and you know what you want to look for, you can do that all right from the search bar. Okay, wildcards. If you know you want something, you want like history of anything, you could put a wildcard, which is just an asterisk, and that will replace that word or whatever with something else, right? This is particularly useful when the word is like between two things. Like I want to find everybody whose name is Maria Andersen but possibly has a different middle name. So I would do Maria wildcard Andersen, and then I would find all of those.
Is this on any search engine or just Google?
This is pretty much universal search
Okay.
here. Our librarian somewhere could probably verify that, but yeah, this works pretty much in anything, whether it's journal searching or it's just standard search language. Also, keywords. So notice here, I added PDF or video or timeline. If you add very simple things to your searches, you will get more targeted what you're looking for. So what what you really want is a worksheet on something, then type PDF, because that's typically the format of most people's shared worksheets, right? Or if you really want an image, you could type PNG or JPEG, but even better, you could use the images feature, which I'll show you in a second. But just think about what kinds of things, if you really want a tutorial, add the word tutorial, right? So there is, in most web browsers now, there's like an all search, but the very next thing over searches images. And this is really useful. So for example, I went to look for a web browser graphic because I wanted to find a new graphic of my 9 web browsers, right? Now on this page, there's just nothing very interesting. But when I went over to the images page, that's where I found that really cool graph. Because when you look at the images that come up in the search, you sometimes find the really interesting things, and you can scan them much faster. So just know that any web search you do, you can click on images and get a very nice visual of all the pages it's found, which I think is more useful than the text search. Do know that search also calculates. So if you have your search window open, you can perform calculate. Oh, it's a good one. You don't have to open the calculator. If you've got your browser open, the browser window will do calculations. You can search without any kind of personalization. So there's a web platform called DuckDuckGo, and this removes you from your own filter bubble. So, you know, one of the problems with the internet right now is that we all get a version of search that's personalized to us. It looks, and some of this is good because it's like looking for, when you look for a restaurant, it looks for restaurants near you and things like that, right? But the problem with it is you tend to start getting fed only the information it thinks you want to have, which means you don't see balanced perspectives. So there are search engines that remove all personalization, that never collect personalization. So one of them is DuckDuckGo. If you don't believe me, I would challenge you to go try in Google, DuckDuckGo, and Bing, and look for something like climate change or gun control or something like that, and you will see very, very different search results in the three engines, depending on how much information it knows about you and your preferences. It's very interesting. One other thing is, I'm just sharing this because I think it's interesting. There's something called red feed, blue feed, and this is put out by the Wall Street Journal, and it basically mines social media sites and finds the most extreme examples it can of liberal and conservative bias in social media. And so any day, you can go and see what the two extreme sides are saying about popular issues. I find this to be very interesting. For me, it puts bumpers on reality. Right, on both ends. It doesn't matter whether you are liberal or conservative, you look at the site and you will be like, wow, those are some extreme ends we have.
Yeah.
I think most of us are not on these extreme ends, but it is valuable, I think, to see them, and especially when there's something really controversial going on. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention, and I forgot to make a slide on it, is there is the ability in browsers to do what's called an incognito window. And so I want to show you this because it's particularly useful when you have like students in your office or something like that. So I'm in Chrome right now, and I'm going to go over to this little toolbar on the edge of Chrome, and in here you'll see this right here, new incognito window. You see that? Mm-hmm. What this does is, and there is one of these types of things in every browser. What it does is open up a tab where I am not signed in. So like if you have a student in your office and they're like, but the program we use doesn't work for me. You say, well, then let's see you log in and see what happens. You want them to log in an incognito window because you don't want their information tied to everything you're logged into. And you also want to make sure that when you close it, you don't have their information stored anywhere, right? So also if you want to do an internet search without personalization, you can do it this way in an incognito window, right? So basically this just gives you a window where nothing is stored, nothing is saved, it's not tied to any of your accounts. So it's a nice way, like if you have to hand your computer to somebody else and let them do something, you give them an incognito window to do it. Or if you need somebody to hand you their computer, because you need to like get your boarding pass or something, you should never do it in their web browser because that history is being saved, right? You can accidentally have like your passwords and stuff get saved in somebody else's history, so you should always open up an incognito window when you're working on somebody else's computer, so that none of your information is being saved.
Is it called a private window in Mozilla?
I think it's private in Mozilla. There's just something like this in all web browsers. Find it. It'll be in that like open up, you know how you right click to open a new window, open a new tab, there's probably open in incognito, open in private. So make sure you know that that exists and that you can use it. Okay. Whoops. Let me click start. Escape. Where were we? Somewhere down here. Okay, so we're moving on to Windows tips. So if you use Windows and you haven't actually learned to use the Windows button, it is actually quite useful. It is a button on your keyboard. You probably never noticed it because you didn't learn about it in typing class a long time ago. But it is there, and what it does is it opens up this start menu for you. You know, the place you type to find files and programs and stuff like that, it opens that up. So it is useful. Once you start typing, do know that you can use the arrow keys up and down on your keyboard to get into that list and use enter to choose anything from that list. So you don't always have to pick up your mouse. You can just use up and down arrows and enter. to get to things. Let's see, what else did I want to say? You can, search for programs in this bar, so you can just type the keywords and hit enter to launch the program. Again, you don't have to click on it. As soon as it shows up in the list highlighted, you can just hit enter. You don't have to type out the whole thing. You can use this button also to minimize everything on your screen. In case there's something on your screen you don't want somebody to see. Like for example, if you're searching for birthday presents for your child, and your child walks into the room, I don't know what you guys were thinking, but so if you press this button with the M key, it minimizes everything on your screen.
Does it have to be uppercase?
What?
Does it have to be uppercase?
No, it doesn't. Just M. Just M is fine. If you want to minimize almost everything on your screen, like let's say you want to keep one thing open but minimize everything else, I'm actually going to show you this works because I never believed it until I try it myself. So I'm going to switch over to Windows here for a second. And I'm going to open up a bunch of stuff on my screen. Let's see. Yes, I'm running Windows on my Mac. At least I'm trying to. It's not easy. Come on, Windows. Oh, maybe I should do it. So there is a way to, it might have trouble on this. We'll see if it's going to behave so. Okay, this display is not working for me. So I'll just have to tell you and you'll just have to try it. So to minimize most everything, you just let's say you're in the window you want to keep and you want everything else to go away. You pick it up with your mouse, like the top of it, and you just shake it. Everything else goes away. What? I'm not kidding. It really works.
You pick up what and shake it.
So let's say you're making a video for your students or something, and you want to remove everything from the desktop but the program you're in. You just pick up the top with the bar, shake it. You have to shake it kind of vigorously, and everything else will disappear from your screen. Just minimizes everything else. It really works. I tried it this morning, but I still didn't believe it, but it does work.
Does it work with touchscreen?
Does it work with a what? I have no idea if it works with a touchscreen. My guess would be yes. I don't know how you shake visually. Yeah, so you guys can all go try it. It's kind of fun. It's a fun trick.
Is it working? Somebody's got Windows.
Okay, some other useful things to know. That same Windows button you never use, if you use Windows with the tab key, you can cycle between your windows. It works, right? It works. It's crazy, right? You're like, what the heck? Where did that come from? It works. Okay, so if you use that Windows button with the tab key, you can cycle between all the windows you have open. Every time you hit tab, it'll cycle to a new window, right? Alt-tab is not quite as sexy as that one, but it does work. It also works on a Mac. So you can cycle between the windows. Every time you hit tab, it goes to a different window. It just does it in a row instead of in this kind of beautiful, fancy way. So you can now impress your friends and neighbors with your incredible abilities to cycle between windows. There is a Windows snipping tool that will let you snip little pieces of the screen to put in newsletters or directions. On Windows, just type snipping, and you'll find it. It'll open up, and you just click and drag the window you want to snip. Okay? Snipping. Just search for snipping. It's there, I promise. On a Mac also has a snipping tool. It's Command-Shift-4. Command-Shift-3 takes the whole screen. Command-Shift-4 allows you to snip a section of your screen. So this exists in both programs. Okay, some editing tips. So first of all, let's just make sure everybody knows that you can cut, copy, and paste. You don't have to use the menu here. Control X, Control C, and Control V will cut, copy, and paste. Okay? On a Mac, it's just Command X, C, and V. Everybody okay with that? Okay, good. I haven't. There are somebody's probably being quiet, but we've had some money moments on this one right here. The next one probably, though. Well, maybe the one after this. So there are some quick ways to do bold, italics, and underline as well. You highlight what you want bold. You type Control V or Command V, and you get bold. Same thing for underline, same thing for italics. Works pretty much universally in every program, right? So whether it's Word or the internet or anywhere else, you can use those to do those commands. So this is the big one for a lot of people. You can paste removing all the formatting. So the bold, italics, the size of the text, etc. You know how when you copy something from the internet and then you paste it into Word, you get all this junk? It's like a different color, a different size. Yeah, so if you paste without formatting, if you do Control-Shift-V, removes all the formatting. Just pastes it nice and clean, text only. It's the same thing that would happen if you pasted it into, I see it. It's the same thing that would happen if you pasted it into the text window first, and then pasted it in. And you can do that in one command. One command. It's really nice. It's really nice. No more notepad. You can do this on a Mac too. Of course, Mac never makes anything easy. So instead of Command-Shift-V, it's Command-Option-Shift-V. But it does work the same way. I promise once you get used to it, your fingers can do the...
That's what I was going to ask you.
Oh yeah, no, it only takes about a day, and then you're like, yep, no problem, I can do this. It's way easier than opening Notepad, pasting to Notepad, copying from Notepad, and pasting to something else. So I use this all the time when I'm doing stuff in a learning management system. Because in a learning management system, you're like copying from Word to the learning management system, or another page to the learning management system. And all of that back-end stuff, it clutters. Remember that HTML code behind everything? It sits there and causes trouble. It doesn't necessarily look like it's causing trouble, but then you get into a different browser or something, you're like, what the heck? Why is there underline there? It's not over here. Why is it there, right? So I try to always paste cleanly into things like Blackboard and Canvas and whatnot. And the way to paste cleanly is to use this. Always a clean paste. Okay? Do know that in Word, they've started to use this for the clean paste. So you actually have to pull down the drop down and then choose to set default paste. But in Google Docs, it just works beautifully. I don't know why Word makes everything complicated, but in Google Docs, you can just paste without formatting. It used to work in Word too, but then they made it complicated. Undo. There's an undo command on pretty much everything, every piece of software. It is Control-Z. It takes out the last step. Keep hitting it, and it'll take out subsequent previous steps. So you can always go backwards. If you press it 5 times, it'll undo the last 5 steps. You can also select everything in a document. So like, let's say you want the whole document because you want to change the font or something like that. A for all. So you can use Control-A to select everything, or Command-A on a Mac. So that can be useful. We already talked about this, but I just thought I'd point out one more time that you can find a specific word in an Excel spreadsheet, in a Google Doc, whatever. Use Command-F, F for find, right? So F for find. Just a couple other little random tips that seems to have fallen through the cracks, folks. If you want to select adjacent objects, now clearly you can click and drag, right, to select adjacent objects, but you can also, like let's say the spreadsheet's really long and you don't want to click and drag down 2,000 rows. You can click the first one and then hold down Shift, find the last cell, and click the last cell, and it'll highlight everything in between. So you don't have to drag, you can just hold down Shift and then go to that last cell, and it will select everything between the first cell and the last cell. Right? But you can also select non-adjacent cells. So if you want like the first cell, the 4th and 5th cell, and the 9th cell to bold, well then just hold down Control while you click those non-adjacent cells, and it'll keep highlighting all the non-adjacent cells. And then you can apply whatever command you have to those. Okay? Nobody looks too excited. All right. You can jump from field to field using the Tab key. Right. So if you're in a spreadsheet, you can use Tab to jump from field to field. If you're in a form on the internet, you can use Tab to jump from field to field.
you can use Shift Tab to back up. Yeah, you can. So you don't have to pick up your mouse and like go to the cell you missed. You can just use Shift Tab to back up. Cool, right? Who knew? So in a table, usually the tabs work like this. So you go across first and then you go down. Again, Shift Tab will back you up. You should also know that sometimes you're working with tables and you want to actually indent something, right? And then it becomes a problem, right? Because Tab will not indent. Tab jumps from field to field. Anyone have this problem?
Yes.
Yeah. So Control Tab indents, just so you know. Yeah. So Shift Tab backs you up. Control Tab will actually indent you in something where Tab normally jumps you. So that's a useful one. While we're on silly little tricks, there's one more, which is Control Enter. Sometimes when you, I think it's, yeah, I thought it was in here, but I think I might have taken it out. When you're in a, like on a website, you cannot get a line, like Skype, for example. When you hit Enter, it sends the message, right? Yeah. Well, Control Enter will go to the next line. Oh. There it is. Yes. That's exactly what you're looking for. Yeah, so when you're in one of those places where Enter sends the message, try Control Enter, and that will usually give you a fresh line break. Yeah.
Can you add that to your PowerPoint when you upload it, do you think?
Can you send me an email to remind me to do it?
I'll try to, yeah. Somebody send me an email to remind
So I thought we would end with some mobile tips, because I have learned a couple of mobile tips that tend to be money moments for people too. Has everybody had a, oh, you know what, I took out this bunch of stuff on images. There is one more thing I meant to tell you that I don't know how it's not in this set of slides. Okay, so you know how you place your cursor in text, right? I'm gonna show you. Because I know it's not in here. I must have been in the set I took out. Took out images, image editing, and put in mobile instead. I knew we were gonna run out of time. But I do want to show you this one. So here it is, something I skipped. You know how you can use your cursor to like place yourself in a paragraph, right? You guys can see that, right? So if you click once, you place the cursor. If you click twice, you select the word. If you click 3 times, you select the paragraph. Just so you know. Sometimes triple click isn't a well-known one, but it's useful, I think. So that works in like cells and tables too. Like clicking once places the cursor, clicking twice selects the word, clicking 3 times selects the whole cell. So if there's multiple words in the cell, it'll select the whole cell. Okay, anyways, back to mobile. I wonder where that slide went. Okay, anyways, mysteries of slide editing. So I thought I would tell you that you can capture screenshots in both Android and iOS, at least for the newest, any version of Android after Ice Cream Sandwich. I don't know what the current version is. All the Androids are named, versions are named after like sweets. So if you want to capture a screenshot on your phone, like you've got a picture you want to send to somebody, you can't download it, or it's like a funny tweet or something, whatever, you use on an Android the volume down and the power button simultaneously. It takes a little practice to get it right, but you'll see it kind of blink, and that tells you that it's stored the screenshot in your photos, right? On iOS, it's the circular button and the power button. So you hold in you press the circular button and the power button in like quick succession. Again, you'll see like a little blink on the screen, and that tells you that it's stored in your photos, right? So I find this is a very useful thing to know how to do, because sometimes you just need to show somebody how to do something, okay? So there is a way to capture a screenshot. The older versions of Android don't actually have it, so it has to be a relatively new version of Android. Any questions on that? Take some practice.
How old is iOS?
Oh, iOS, it always worked. Yeah. I thought I would also point out that you do not have to sign into your phone to open up the camera. I don't quite know how to do it on Android. Again, it only came out with Ice Cream Sandwich that there's a way to do it. I couldn't find screenshots of it, and I don't have an Android. But I know that there's a way to do it with Ice Cream Sandwich, and you can Google it. But on an iPhone, basically, there's this tiny little icon right here that's like a camera. And if you swipe up, you see this menu, and if you click that, you can open up your camera without having to sign in. So if you're like on vacation or something, you're just using it as a camera, you don't have to sign in every time. You can just do this and hand the camera to somebody. They can't get into anything else, it's just the camera that's open. So same thing works on Android, except I just don't have a screenshot of it. But there is a way to do it, so just inspect your Android screen and find a camera icon on it. That's probably what does the trick. So anyways, I spent a whole vacation once signing in every time I wanted to take a picture. I don't know if any of you have done that, but tips that are helpful. I thought I would point out one other tip. Some of you know how to do panoramas with all of the phones now. The new ones do panoramas, which are really nice. You go into panorama mode, you click, you move your phone, and then you let go, and it takes a panorama. Just so you know, you can take vertical panoramas. So if you're like in a canyon that's very tall and you want a picture of the whole canyon, just turn the panorama sideways and do it vertically. It works. It's lovely. Yeah. I taught a whole bunch of people in the Narrows last year how to do vertical panoramas, like one after another. They were all trying to take family shots. They couldn't get the whole camera. Anyways, my friend is very interested. I have 3 apps I'm going to share with you that I find invaluable on a cell phone. So I make no money from these. I just can't live without them. I don't know how you do. So the first one is called iScanner. It turns your phone into a scanner, a high-quality scanner. And so it does cost like $5, but it's worth every penny. So when I need to return papers to students, when I need to sign a form and return it to a bank, any of those things, you put the piece of paper down on the table, you hold up your phone, you take the picture of it, it scans it, or it takes the picture, and then it asks, you can like decide you want it in color, in black and white. You can choose the edges of the paper so it'll fix the distortion of the picture, and then it turns it into a PDF file that you can send.
I use a cam scanner for
Cam
my
scanner?
students, for them to send me stuff, because photos don't do well.
Yeah.
It's all free.
Oh, so cam scanner.
That, but cam scanner.
Cam scanner would be good for students then. Yeah.
Hand?
Cam. It's a camera. Yeah, so if you haven't thought to start using your phone as a scanner, like my husband was like, I think we should buy a scanner. I'm like, I think you should get an app. One other that I find invaluable, you know all those stupid cards you get from stores?
Yeah.
There's an app called Keyring, which basically takes a picture. You take a picture of the front and back of every one of those cards, and it even shows the barcode on the screen in case they've got a scannable barcode reader. So you could stop carrying the like stack of loyalty cards with you, and you just put them all into here instead.
That's the same thing. So that's pretty much the same thing as the wallet on the iPhone.
Yeah, the wallet.
So the wallet on iPhone, yeah.
Does that cost money?
What? No, this one's free. They have like a little advertisement at the top here, so it's free. But yeah, I find, if you're not using something like that, find something like that. You can eliminate a lot of cards from your wallet. You can just search and find what you're looking for. So that's really nice. And then last, I have to just say that Wunderlist, if you've never used a shared list tool before, there are a bunch: Todoist, Wunderlist, Find the Milk, etc. I use Wunderlist. What you can do is, I can have lists for every part of my life, but in particular, the one I thought I'd point out to you is the one called Grocery Store. So because I can have Wunderlist and my husband can have Wunderlist, either of us can add to the grocery list, and you can do it from your computer, your phone, his phone, whoever is on the list. When you go to the grocery store, you just open up the app, and you can check them off the list as you go.
I do that with any list.
And then they know that you bought it, and it's all done. I actually have these lists for my co-founder and I. He lives in Europe and I live here, and we keep a list for everything we're developing together. So we just always are on shared lists. I can see if he's done something, he can see if I've done something. And then what's really nice is you can star things, and so if you have a whole bunch of lists, you can just go look at starred and see all of the most important things from all of your lists in one place, right? So anyways, if you don't use something like this, I thought I would at least point out that you can have shared lists. And it's very useful if you have a family and lots of errands and things that need to be run. You can have an errands list. When you put all the errands on, whoever happens to be close to where the errand is happening can do it. Check it off the list, everybody knows it's done. So it's nice. And so that's it. Did everybody learn something?
Yes.
Okay, great. That's all. Thank you.
question?
Yeah.
Where are we gonna go to access the account?
Yeah, so I'll put up a new, I have a version of this up already, but I'll put up a new version on my website, which is busynessgirl.com.
Okay.
And we can try and email it out to
Yes.
everyone
Yes,
because
they can do that
Hannah
too.
here has recorded it. And so we can send out a link. I think I can coordinate with Margot McGowan. We'll send out a link to everyone with the recording and then include a link to the website as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, any other questions?
You guys will have to tell me what your money moments are, because I'm always curious.
Since this is a Title III event, we will have a post-survey. That's why you had a pre-survey, because now we're going to have a post-survey. So we are going to send it out by email, but if you prefer to do just a paper one, we have the post-surveys in the back of the room here. So if you prefer that, you can just do it now and get it over with. If not, you'll have it by email. Thank you again, Dr. Anderson.